Or as I'm known on Instagram, FELFears, and I've been asked to film a tutorial for my Necron colour scheme. Now I haven't done anything like this before, so please bear with me. Hopefully you get something out of it. I get asked a lot about this scheme and it's very simple, as you're about to find out. I think the key with this scheme is that it uses an unusual metallic, which not a lot of people tend to use. So the main colour, please excuse the pain on my hands, is Screaming Bell, and this is that nice copper colour that everyone seems to really like. I also use Incubi Darkness, Temple Guard Blue, Canoptek Alloy, and Abaddon Black. And also for any rocks on the base I just use Karak Stone. Highlights, edge highlights, are just Corax White and Dawnstone for any highlights on the black. Washes are Reikland Fleshshade and Nuln Oil. I do use a wet palette, not for the metallics but for any of the other paints and also for the wet blends that I do. And brush wise I am using a Rosemary & Co. number 2, an old Citadel layer brush just because I'm using it until it dies essentially, just for any small bits and highlights, and a rubbish starter brush because that is just my wash brush. I am painting a Necron warrior today, so hopefully by the end it will look something like this. Oh, I do also, before I forget, use Blue Horror as a highlight as well. This is how it looks on a Cryptothrall. I still think they're probably my favourites that I've painted in this game. And this is how it looks on one of these guys. So it's really the wet blends I think that draws people's eye, but yeah, hopefully you will enjoy this little tutorial. So I like to undercoat Necrons in Leadbelcher just because when you're painting an army there are a lot of little tiny bits, and when you've got, when you're batch painting or you've got a lot to paint, it's a little bit easier if you've got a metallic undercoat already, so if there's any tiny bits that you have missed it doesn't look out of place. So excuse me sniffling as well, I've been putting off filming this because I have a cold but it won't go away. So I will start by just blocking in the main colours. Now I usually start with Incubi Darkness. I'm going to give that a bit of a shake. We'll get onto that first. Well, that's not good, is it? Let's shake that a bit more. So as always you need a damp brush, not too wet, and I'll put some of this onto my wet palette. I'll take it off there just to keep it moist. So Incubi Darkness in this scheme I put on all the joints and where else? That's pretty much it. Yeah, just the joints and this bit at the back here. See if I can get a better light. There we go. So hopefully you can see this okay. So I try and be as neat as possible to avoid having to do loads of touch-ups, but it's not necessary. I always end up having to do some touch-ups anyway. And I'm kind of painting through the camera, which is interesting. Okay, once the Incubi Darkness is done, I then go with the Canoptek Alloy. Now this does take a couple of coats to cover usually, as it is a layer paint, not a base paint. So I apply this to kind of any, I just call it like exposed metalwork, so like here and here, also the ribs here and these bits on the feet. This guy also has a small scarab here, so I will be putting it on the legs of the scarab. So that's just what I'm going to do now. So the Incubi Darkness coat is usually the messy one, and then I try and be neater with the next two colours. However, just to speed this up, I am using a larger brush, so it's likely that it will just need quite a bit of touch up before I wash it. And I do go straight from the pot on this one. Please don't hate me. The Canoptek Alloy is done, it's time for the Screaming Bell. This goes on pretty much everywhere else that's not going to be black, so yeah, and it applies really nicely with it being a base paint, so generally doesn't take too much work. I may switch to a smaller brush shortly though. Once that's done, and not streaky or anything, I move on to the Abaddon Black. So this, I don't use a lot of this, but it mostly just goes on the barrel of the gun. Trying to get into all the recesses. It also goes here. Pretty much the whole model base coated now. So now it's just on to neatening up before it is washed. So on the neatening up stage, ignore the fact I'm covered in paint. It happens every time, and I just had a bit of an argument with Incubi Darkness there. So when I'm neatening, I like to have all my colours ready. I know it's not the best practice, but I'm generally quite quick, and it just makes it a little bit easier for me, because as soon as I spot something that needs neatening, I can just go straight to the pot and do it. Because if I don't do it there and then, I'm likely to forget. Right, so I can't see any more screwing about at the moment that needs neatening. So let's move on to this one. Okay, so now it's blue time. I'll do some of it now. but I'll do most after it's been washed. Just because I don't really want to darken the blue with the rest of the model. Okay. I can have a dot on the eyes. And the other place is here. I'm not quite sure why I painted them black this time, because I usually just paint them the blue straight away, but never mind. Okay, so that's the blue done for now. Last thing to do is Karak Stone, just on the little stone by his foot. Use my big brush again, just speed it up a bit. Okay, so at this stage, please ignore the paint on my hands, but you should have a neatly painted, well, base coated mini. So now it is time for the wash. You need to make sure, obviously, that the model is completely dry before we wash it. And I generally do the Reikland Fleshshade first, and I apply that to any screaming bell areas. So any of the copper. And I just use my rubbishy brush for that. You want to be quite heavy with it, but not too heavy that it, you know, pulls ridiculously. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit untidy and it goes on any other areas. But try and keep it just on the copper. Last thing is to go straight in then with a Nuln Oil wash, and that goes everywhere else. I do go pretty heavy with this wash. as that silver is really bright, but if you do put too much on, it's easy enough to get it off. We also apply it on the blue here. And on the barrel of the gun too. This blade here will be wet blended, that's the last thing that I do, but it always helps to give it a good undercoat and wash first. And also give the little rock a Nuln Oil wash as well. So that is the whole model washed. I think I've just missed that little join in there. The wash has dried on this guy now, so he is ready for highlights. I will probably do the blue first. So, straight in with Temple Guard Blue, small brush, just put some of that on my wet palette. Okay, so, see if it will focus, there we go. Just going to refresh this bit again. And go it over. I seem to have very shaky hands today. And back on in the eyes too. Focus. Any mistakes in a minute. Okay, now with the indents in the ribs, this is where the wet palette comes in. Obviously you can do it without. Water down the blue quite a bit so that essentially I can just pour it into the recesses. Like that. It's surprisingly neat when you do it this way, but again, I always do a bit of a touch up right at the end. Okay, now I do the same thing in the indents on the weapon. Like that. Okay, so that's the blue done. Give that plenty of time to dry. And while that's drying, I will do the edge highlights. So I use Corax White for this. Now, I find it's different for everyone, but I find that when the paint's really wet, I struggle to edge highlight properly because it goes everywhere. Whereas if you kind of let it dry a little bit on the brush, I find it easier, especially on these. Obviously using the side of the brush, just very, very lightly. This is a little bit too wet for my liking, but it will start to dry out soon and I'll get an easier highlight. You just want to pick out as many edges as possible, really, but depends what you're painting. If you're painting, you know, a character or HQ unit, maybe you want to spend a bit more time, but this is only a warrior, so I am pretty much just going to pick out the minimal amount, really. Do the bottom of the chin. I won't bother with that one actually. So now it's too wet. If it's too thick, I'll just go back after and tidy it up. The good thing is these minis lend themselves very, very well to edge highlighting. It's not too much of a chore. So I edge highlight in white on the copper and the silver. I sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling, pick out more of the silver and white just to bring it up even more. Definitely around the base here. And now the blue has dried. Let me go over that. A bit more paint. Probably do for the white highlights. On any Incubi Darkness bits, I highlight with Blue Horror, which needs a very good shake. It's decided to pretty much congeal, although this is quite useful for edge highlighting. I'm just going to really thin this down on my wet palette. Yes, it's become a bit of a paste. Okay. Now I pick out these bits, usually with Blue Horror. Just to give a little bit more of a spot colour. This pose is particularly difficult today for this one. You'll probably need to do a couple of coats on these. I've added a few more highlights and just touched up any that I'd messed up a bit. So this is roughly where we're at now. Okay, so the last bit is the wet blend on the little blade. Of course you don't have to do it. I think I'm a little bit crazy for wet blending on every single Necron model, but you know. So I'm relatively new to wet blending myself, so it's always a bit of kind of luck, but I start with Incubi Darkness, so getting a nice coat, and I generally cover up to about pretty much the whole thing, and then I have my Temple Guard Blue. Obviously both need to be pretty watered down. I chuck that on where I want it, trying not to lose too much of that nice bright colour. Okay, and that's the two colours on. Then I clean my brush, pretty much dry it, still slightly damp, and then I just try my best. You might need to add more paint here and there. Try my best to just get a nice fade into that darker colour. As I say, a lot of it I think is luck. Well, for me anyway. It's kind of a lot of chucking of paint on and hoping you get a relatively nice fade. That's not too bad. You kind of don't know what it's going to look like properly until it's dry, so try not to faff around too much with it, because from experience I tend to make it worse. You also don't want the paint too watered down, because then you just don't get any colour really on there. So I'm going to flip straight onto the next side and get on with that side as well. So same thing again, covering it in my darker colour. And then going in with the Temple Guard Blue, which I think I'm going to need some more of. And adding that in. Okay, so that's too strong, so I need some water in there. That's better. And then it is a case of making myself wait for it to dry. While I'm waiting, I will just add a very quick highlight to the black pipe work. I just do this with a bit of Dawnstone. I'm not particularly picky with this. It's just getting a bit of a highlight in there to break up the black a bit. I don't always do it. Especially not on warriors, but side. Not too flat. So this is nearly dry now, and as you can see, I've actually managed to get a fairly decent fade. I will probably go over it and do it again, but I'll come back once it's dry. So I've dried. I am pretty happy with those. I'm not going to redo those because once I've added a edge highlight to them and filled in these little recesses, they will look fine for a warrior. If it was something like this guy, those blends took quite a while and I'm still not very happy with those, but that's probably more of what I would hope to achieve. But it really is just trial and error and practice. Right, so I am going to first of all water down some blue horror, and I'm going to seep that into the recesses just like I did earlier, just to draw the eye. Leave that to dry, and then a white edge on here. So I definitely don't want too much paint on this because this is the one highlight I really can't afford to mess up, because it would mean redoing a wet blend. And I do not feel like that. I try and pick out pretty much all the edges. Last thing, I did do a white dot in the eye as well. Don't think I had that on camera. Last thing to do is to fill in that little circle here, just to make that stand out again. There we go. And that is a finished Necron warrior in my colour scheme. So I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. That was a relatively quick paint job for me. It has taken me, I've been painting a second one at the same time, so it's taken me a while. But yeah, that's how he's turned out for now. So on to basing. Okay, so basing these guys, I went for a really simple base because the scheme itself is quite busy. I didn't want to detract too much from it. So Stolen Mud, followed by Rival Crafts Rocky Canyon Scatter, which is awesome, and one of these tufts, maybe half on a warrior. I might cut it in half. I can't remember where these are from, but I'm pretty sure Rival Crafts have something similar, if not better. I get pretty much all my basing stuff from there now, so highly recommend. So first things first, I have a old Corax White, which is basically congealed into the consistency of a dry paint. So with a small dry brush, a very battered one, I do the little rock and the feet, just to blend it into the base a little bit more. Slightly up the legs, not a lot, just a little bit. Put that away. Next is Stern Mud. Oh, that's not the right one. Let's use the one I've opened. So I have my little Citadel spatula thing. I've forgotten what it's called, texture paint thing. And I'm just going to stick it onto the base, making sure that I'm not missing anywhere. Now this will act as the adhesive for the base scatter material, which I will apply while this is still wet. Okay, lid on that. Okay, right, now this stuff's great. It has some bigger kind of rocks in it, which we don't really want on such a small mini, so I'm going to kind of pinch those and try and keep those out of the way. And then just, because I want plenty of the sand on there, just scatter it on. That's enough, and then tap off the extra. Get off any bits that don't quite work. Okay, and then with one of my tufts I'm going to just cut it in half. And just find somewhere, which I think I'll go with around here. My nails are too long at the moment to stick that on. Might need some tweezers on the job. Again, I tend to just use the Sterling Mud as the adhesive, but you can obviously apply it with glue. They are sticky anyway, but once it dries it's pretty solid. So that is simple as that for the base, and then I'll just tidy up, and final job is to do the rim. So for the rim of all of my minis I go with Abaddon Black, but you need to make sure it's watered down so that it's not too thick. I just use a really old brush as well. Just do the rim. I just feel that this finishes it off nicely and looks really smart. Okay, and we are done. I ended up going a bit heavy on the rim, but not really fussed at the moment. Ideally do a thinner coat than I did. So this is the finished one. And I'm just going to show you a few other examples. I've also just finished this guy actually, which I was just painting alongside the other one. So I'm just going to show you some other examples of the scheme so you can get an idea of how it looks on other Necrons. So this was the actual first Necron I painted and my first 40k model, Illuminazares. It was the first time doing this scheme, so you might notice that I now do the blue quite a lot brighter, but I was really happy with how he turned out. So that was him. This is the Scorpet Lord. He was a challenge. I wet blended all of his claws, which I regretted, but yeah. The orbs on him didn't turn out so great. I was going for like a milky effect. I think they look okay, but I'd probably redo them if I could be bothered. Plasmancer was one of the first ones I did as well. You can see that wet blend is not the best, but I did get some nice blends on his cloak. Let me just move you up a bit. Reanimator. This one was tricky to paint. Very tricky. I definitely wish I'd sub-assembled that one. And finally, so yeah, that that's what the scheme looks like on other Necrons. Hopefully you like it, and hopefully this tutorial was helpful. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will see you over on Instagram.
Wow, thank you very much, Liz. That's amazing. Basically what happened, guys, was I saw these Necrons on Instagram and I absolutely had to persuade her to do a YouTube tutorial because the scheme fascinates me and it just looks so striking and impressive and unique, and I absolutely adore it. So once again, thank you so much, Liz, for doing this. I hope this is helpful for everybody. It's really helpful for me. There's lots of different techniques going on here. I particularly love the Corax White highlight on the silver and on the Screaming Bell. It's a really interesting technique, but it absolutely is just it looks brilliant. So well done, and thank you so much. And of course, the fun doesn't stop there. If you've got an idea or you've got a technique that you're particularly proud of and you'd love to show off on YouTube, then please do get in touch on Instagram at Warhipster or on Twitter at Warhipster, or you can email us at therealwarhipster@gmail.com. And lastly, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me further, like these legends on the screen right now, you can do so at patreon.com/warhipster or ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We'd love to hear what you think. And if you'd like to be kept up to date, make sure you hit the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Liz, for your work and time and effort and for your wonderful Necron scheme. And I'll see you all in the next one.